She should have won in 2001.
Nelly, coming from the Lou, did you ever have chip on your shoulder? Because everything was LA, New York. We always talk about that with the Midwest, man. Like,
goddamn right.
Yeah?
Goddamn right. But you got to understand, my era of music was the toughest era in hip-hop ever.
In 2024, Nelly would make an argument that his era in hip-hop, which would be around the year 2000 to 2004, which we would see artists like Ja Rule, 50 Cent, Nelly, and Eminem really dominate the hip-hop landscape and the hip-hop charts. And you can't really knock the talent in that era because these MCs were very talented. It did help bridge hip-hop into new audiences and fan bases across the globe. But at the same time, you have to really go back and just review the history of hip-hop to really get an understanding of what eras were and how difficult it was to actually come out of these eras. But when you roll back the tape and rewind time, the toughest era in hip-hop would be the Genesis era, the 80s. You had artists like LL Cool J, the first artist signed to Def Jam. You had Run DMC with $1 Million shoe deals back in the 80s. EPMD taking what Run DMC did and taking it to another level. You had NWA with songs called F the Police and really just bringing hardcore street music to hip-hop. Public Enemy, who embodied the civil rights and political movements and made it all digestible on wax. Then you had Slick Rick, the master of storytelling. And if you want to talk about street rap, and you got Cool G Rap, and you really can't out-rap Cool G Rap when it comes to that. And then, of course, Rakim, who would be giving master classes on supreme mathematics and hip-hop, and all without using profanity. And one of the major pillars from that era who would help lay down the foundation for conscious hip-hop was KRS-One. KRS-One, just like all the MCs in the 80s, didn't really have a blueprint to really go off of. All they knew is that they wanted to be MCs and they wanted to carry on the culture. KRS-One would come out the gates with one of the best debuts of all time under the Boogie Down Productions name, Criminal Minded. And this was a street album. You would start to see over the years as KRS-One started to grow, not only as a man, but through his lyrics and his albums, as they all became more and more conscious. These albums are not only conscious, but thought-provoking and also critically acclaimed. You can make the argument that KRS-One dropped 5 classic albums out the gate, starting with Criminal Minded and then ending the Boogie Down Productions albums on Sex and Violence in 1992. In 1992, KRS-One reached a pivotal and key year in his career. One would be through his public perception of who he is as a conscious MC, and also his record label Jive Records maybe wanted to go in a new direction for his career going forward. Public perception can go 2 different ways. If you're an MC that rhymes about street life and things happen where you get into some type of altercation, most people will just chalk it up to maybe he's living out his rhymes. Now, if you're a conscious MC and get into an altercation, then you might get challenged immediately because now you're not really living that persona. And that would come into play with PM Dawn, who KRS-One would get into an altercation with. Now, to KRS-One's defense, he felt like PM Dawn, through interviews and magazine articles, would continue to take shots at him being not only an MC, but a conscious MC. So he wanted to address that in person. But sometimes perception can become reality in certain people's eyes. And this altercation coming from KRS-One wasn't the best thing. It didn't necessarily end his career, but people started to really, take notice of this event. The second issue KRS-One was facing was his fifth studio album, Sex and Violence. There was a lot of controversy with the album's art cover, the lead single, and overall the production on the album. One of the major things that was really missing from the Sex and Violence albums was just that lead major single that KRS-One was known for dropping on all the albums leading up to this album. But there was nothing really wrong with the actual content on the album. This is one of the strongest albums in KRS-One's discographies. And not only that, it garnered 4.5 mics through the Source magazine. So this album was not only one of his best albums to date, it was also heavily critically acclaimed as one of the best albums of that year. And not only that, fellow Boogie Down Productions member, KRS-One's brother and DJ Kenny Parker added around 4 to 5 beats on the album. So this was really an in-house classic. Unfortunately, KRS-One's record label, Jive Records, didn't really feel that way. They felt like this album, as far as album sales, didn't really meet up to previous albums. And also they felt like the production on the album was lacking and was ultimately the reason the album didn't really reach the success they felt it would have, just due to, of course, because there was no really huge singles to really push the album into the hands of the masses. Jive Records is now giving KRS-One an ultimatum if he wants to continue recording music and also remaining profitable, is to, one, not to include his brother DJ Kenny Parker on anything going forward, and two, really going back to the drawing board and coming out with something new to keep up with the times.
BDP really is KRS-One. I keep the name going as I have since '87. I keep the name going, just because people kind of grew up with it and kind of like it. It sort of means something. BDP really has not yet begun to expand. I had to go through some nasty breakups in the past with BDP because I'm the president of Boogie Down Productions, and I didn't really like what I was seeing within the confines of Boogie Down Productions. So everyone had to go. Took about 2 years, sort things out. And
1992, my career was finished. 1992, that was it. I put out a record called Sex and Violence and it flopped. Actually, it sold 250,000 albums. To me, that's a lot of people. But to the record company, if you wasn't gold, 500,000 million records sold, it was a flop. Imagine that. So, Sex and Violence coming off of Edutainment. Edutainment was platinum. Okay? Coming off of that, 1 million records, 700,000 records sold on Edutainment when Sex and Violence comes out, and I only sell 250,000 of Sex and Violence. So the record company is now like, well, Chris, it was a good ride. Ooh, Sex and Violence is not doing what we are investing into you. What we are investing, we're not getting it out of these records. So I was like, well, seems like you need to stop investing in me then. And that's exactly what they did. Stop investing in conscious rap.
Boogie Down Productions' run from 1987 to 1992 will be supplanted in hip-hop forever as one of the best, if not the best, catalogs of all time. That would end in 1992, birthing KRS-One. Knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone, with a solo career moving forward. KRS-One didn't want to end in 1992. He wanted to show that he was still as hungry as anyone in hip-hop and wanted to show and prove. And just to further prove that the 2000s really couldn't compete with eras before them, the early 90s was no joke. You had Dr. Dre and Ice Cube really transforming hip hop, dominating, and also putting out some of the best hip hop albums of all time. And not only that, the youth of hip hop started to really dominate it as well, with artists like Chris Cross, who would amass millions of young fans and really start to add new fans into the hip hop culture. And then even Onyx taking a more street appeal, but also still young and vibrant, adding a lot of new competition to hip hop in the early 90s. The West Coast and G-Funk sound would forever change hip hop sonically. This would become one of the most dominant sounds in hip hop of the late 80s and early 90s and really changed the way hip hop sounded. The samples used by West Coast producers were a lot different from other regions. This sound with the melodies would definitely catapult the West Coast as a dominant coast in the 90s, with producers like DJ Quake, Dr. Dre, DJ Slip, and Big Hutch, to name a few. In 1992, KRS-One was successfully rebranded from Boogie Down Productions to just KRS-One. And he really had to eternalize everything that Jive Records told him about not only what's going to happen going forward, but how his new album was supposed to sound and how important singles would be for this new album. KRS-One knew that this will probably be the most important album of his career, and then he would start to bring in producers for his new album and get to recording. KRS-One knew how important it was to bring in top-notch producers. He would enlist one of the most legendary producers and DJs of all time, Kid Capri, and also legendary producer from DITC Showbiz. KRS-One knew that he needed just one more producer that was going to really take this album over the top and handle the bulk of the production. And that would be the legendary DJ Premier from the legendary group Gang Starr. At this time, DJ Premier was starting to produce artists outside of Gang Starr, and KRS-One knew this was a perfect time to try to recruit DJ Premier.
Came out. 1993, I run into a dude named DJ Premier. And I ran into him because he put out a record called Dwick. And before that, it was a record Just to Get a Rep. I'm a DJ by heart. So I go and I buy my records. I used to buy vinyl. So I bought that Just to Get a Rep, do that shit on, Just to Get a Rep. Play it right now on a Guru. Go over there, I'm playing Just to Get a Rep. I'm like, this is hip hop. This is what we should be sounding like. This record. Now keep in mind, guess who the record is? Guru. Guru means teacher. I gravitated toward that. Hooked up with DJ Premier. I said, I want a whole album like Dwick and like Just to Get a Rap. So me and Premier went into the old D&D studios and came out with the masterpiece, Return of the Boom Bap. We straight wild out on that record. Straight wild on that record. Okay.
As the album was starting to wrap up, KRS-One knew that the first single, he had to come out swinging, and he definitely did with the song called Outta Here. Now, Outta Here was produced by DJ Premier, and this song showcases everything that KRS-One has basically done leading up to this point in his career. He's basically giving you an overview and also letting you know that MCs, if they don't have what it takes to remain in hip hop, they're going to be out of here. And this is the perfect lead-off single to the album.
Funky down. Nasty. Hey, listen to the man. Yeah, Godfather. Hey there. No blood.
The origins for the next single, and probably one of the biggest singles of KRS-One's career, the sound of the police, actually starts with DJ Kenny Parker and Heather B. Now, one day when DJ Kenny Parker and Heather B was in the studio working on her solo debut, KRS-One came in and laid down a hook for the sound of the police. Heather B recorded the song, and this song never really came out officially, but this was the actual beginnings of the song. Now, once that album was scrapped for Heather B, KRS-One would remember the hook and then actually lay down a brand new version of the song for his own album. The original beat to the sound of the police was actually produced by DJ Kenny Parker, but since KRS-One was rolling out with all new producers on this new album, Showbiz would do the production for the new version of the sound of the police.
That's the sound of the police. Whoop, whoop. That's the sound of the police. Whoop, whoop. That's the sound of the police.
KRS-One's debut solo album was released in 1993, with the sound of the police being one of the biggest singles of his career and one of the biggest moments of his life. And it's not just due to the production, it's really due to what he's saying on the record.
And this record is KRS-One representing the collective consciousness of black youth in America today. Ever since the Rodney King case and verdict, black youth, as well as youth in general, but I'll just pinpoint it to black youth, are very fed up with the judicial system on a whole. And it's not a record that should be looked at as, oh, this is just another cop bashing record. It's a record basically expressing how we feel. We know how the judicial system feels about us. They sent the Marines to South Central LA. Now we would like to say how we feel about you or them.
Roll tape.
Rewinding back to 1988, NWA dropped one of the biggest songs of all time called F the Police. And on the surface level, a lot of critics took it as disrespect towards the police. But what NWA ultimately was trying to say is that people of color in certain neighborhoods weren't really being treated the same as they were in different neighborhoods. This would wake up not only the American public, but also people from around the globe to see how people of color were being treated. And this was a very important message. Jump from 1988 to 1991, we finally are getting to see police brutality live on every single TV in America. Everything that NWA was talking about that critics say that they were going too far started to come to light. This would then spark riots in Los Angeles, but ultimately showing that there is something behind what a lot of rappers were discussing, not only NWA, but Public Enemy and other MCs in that time. But the media would then flip it and say, well, KRS-One, NWA, Public Enemy, Tupac, or just anyone talking about police violence are just one-offs, and that maybe they're just over-exaggerating. But if you really want to piece the puzzle together, you'd actually have to go back hundreds and hundreds of years to the Runaway Slave Patrol, which would be considered the original police, who were responsible for capturing any people of color that ran away to try to avoid oppression. So you start to see the roots of this actually is 300, 400, 500 years old. Now, if you fast forward to 2021 and you really break down the lyrics from the Sound of the Police, KRS-One is talking about the police riding horses, having the right to arrest. And you look at what happened a few years ago when indigenous people of color from Haiti were trying to enter the United States. And if you really go back, the people from Haiti were from the United States, and the people from the United States were from Haiti. So these people were mixed together. People were brought from here to there. And now you look at it's the same police officer on the same horse with the same whip, arresting the same people as the slave patrols did. And this all goes back to the police brutality in the 90s, NWA addressing it in 88, KRS-One continuing the trend and just waking up the public to what's happened before and what's continuing to happen now. Now, the album has a lot of important songs, but if you really look at it right out the gate, he's starting with Outta Here, and then he's following up with Black Cop. Now, Black Cop is almost like a sequel to Black Drug Dealer, but this time he's really putting the lights on black cops in the neighborhoods and what they are allowing and what they're not allowing, and how they're almost transforming into the slave patrol, as we mentioned earlier. And in movies like Menace to Society and movies like Boys in the Hood, this is really mirroring his lyrics and actually showing you what that looks like in real time if you've never been a part of these neighborhoods to see and witness this in real time.
Everybody loves the gangsta, even myself. Everyone loves a good sex symbol, even myself. But someone has to come out and say things that are relevant to the times and to the consciousness of the people within the midst of that. And it's sort of a sacrifice because I'll never go platinum. I'll probably hardly get gold, but I'll be known by more people in society than my records will actually sell.
KRS-One would continue his trend in dropping classic hip-hop albums. The Return of the Boom Bap was nominated as one of the top 100 albums of all time in the Source magazine 100th issue, just proving with a little bit of determination, the right production, a conscious mind, and the right delivery, you can continue success in hip-hop as long as you have those important ingredients. What's the moral to this story? KRS-One is saying that you can still be true to yourself, be true to your culture, but also be able to say something of substance. At the beginning of the Return of the Boom Bap album, he said, "We will be here forever." And what he's really saying is that not only is hip hop going to be here forever, but conscious music will be here forever. The inception of hip hop has always been conscious, even though it's transformed and morphed over the years. Hip hop is always going to be about what you're saying and how what you're saying can affect not only yourself, but the globe on a global level. And the second just important message would be production in hip hop. We saw how DJ Hi-Tech elevated Yasin Bey and Talib Kweli's lyrics to the next stratosphere. The production that Hi-Tech was able to do on the Black Star album and subsequent music for both of them would just show how important beats are, not only to hip hop, but also to conscious MCs. And another example would be when Kanye West linked up with Common. Common was already known in the hip hop circle, but with this newer production, it took him to the next level and really made him a household name. And the final example and the final and probably the greatest lesson is everybody's favorite MC from Queensbridge, Nas. Nas, we first heard him in 1991, debuting in 1994. And as of last year, he released 6 brand new albums with legendary producer Hit Boy. This further just shows the need for not only the top production, but also when it comes to conscious rappers. As I said, when KRS-One said we'll be here forever, this feeds into conscious music being here forever, because when you rap about conscious topics, you can never end your career because you always have something to say. You will always have a career in hip hop because you have something to say. This will last past any other type of topics that people rap about, because conscious lyrics are always going to be here, and so will conscious MCs.